Being a business owner or an entrepreneur is certainly not for everybody. You've got to know how to make quick decisions, and I think that's one thing I'm pretty good at, is making quick decisions. Agencies are tough, man. Yeah, they're not easy. Maybe I picked the wrong industry.
What makes a great ad?
Good question. The product or service has to be great first. When Facebook was in its peak, people were just so focused on getting the result, they didn't care. They neglected the brand. It went so far off brand guidelines that it just did not matter what it looked like, so long as you get a result.
What's one piece of advice for your younger self?
Invest in Bitcoin. No.
What advice would you give to someone who's just starting a business?
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Think about something that makes you happy and that you want to keep doing in the next 5-10 years.
Is there something that comes to mind for you that you think, just look back, I can go far out?
Our journey? Oh God. We've had crazy clients threaten real nasty stuff to us.
What it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can never break us down, cause we're golden.
Before we dive into the episode, I just want to say a massive thank you to the Startup Diaries community. We just surpassed 200 reviews on Spotify, which is a huge milestone. If you had said that this is where we would be when I first started, I probably would have laughed in your face, but the reason that we've been able to grow and have so many amazing guests on is because of you guys tuning in every week and supporting the show, whether that's with reviews, liking the videos, commenting, sharing on socials. All of that stuff really, really helps. And we do plan to take things to the next level this year. We have some massive plans. I can't share those with you right now, but if there is something that you can do to continue to help support the show, it's definitely hitting the subscribe button, and we look forward to sharing our plans with you in the future. All right, we'll get back to the episode. Blake, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mate, we've obviously been chatting back and forth for a few weeks now, and really excited to chat to you today. You've been on a startup journey in a sense, which is really what this podcast is all about. We have a lot of people who are thinking about starting a business, or they're in their first couple of years, and we all know the trials and tribulations that happen in those early days and the stories that you have. So really excited to talk to you about GMS, your agency, and the journey that you've been on, the lessons that you've learned, and we'll also unpack your business brain as well, which is something that I look forward to.
Yeah, pumped to be here. Very grateful and excited to unfold everything I can from my story.
All right, mate, let's dive in.
Cool.
So let's start with the startup story. How did GMS start? What was the idea? How did you kind of get going?
Yeah, I mean, I always believe everything happens for a reason, and I'm pretty intuitive with the way that I go about my life, my career, and I do believe that there's sort of signs that life throws at you. I guess it started, my parents have always been entrepreneurial. My dad's been in lots of different trades of business, hospitality, clubs, restaurants, property. Mum sort of has been the operator, so they work really well. Dad's the sort of thinker and sort of builds it. My mum's been the operator, so they've been able to sort of work well together, and just sort of seeing them live a life that's been quite free, for them to make the decisions they want to, for them to allow us to have a great upbringing and the education and everything that come with it, with myself and my brother, having quite a small family. I really admired that. And it wasn't something that I think I could have gone two ways, One, just follow what they do and sort of work with the family business, which was definitely possible, or try and replicate that in my own way based on my own beliefs that I've built from growing up. And I think just from, being in school, going through uni, I studied business at UTS, and naturally, in the first year, they throw a lot of subjects at you, and you sort of then build a major from there. And I was terrible at maths, accounting and finance. I actually failed finance, was able to sit the exam again, so passed it eventually. But marketing and sort of English was something that I was a bit more natural in. Quite good with words in terms of, literature. But yeah, not so great with maths, unless I really, really tried, but it just didn't come natural. So I think, I always envisioned of wanting my own business, even before getting into, the career and, the big world, the post-university. I had my first job in actually placing TV ads for Foxtel. And that was quite a big organisation. They're a multi-$100 million business. And whilst that was a great first job out of university, I knew pretty quickly within about 6 months that it wasn't for me. It was a lot of just repetition, data entry. Although I was working with lots of great brands at the time, and it exposed me to how a big business operated, the one thing I didn't quite sit well with me was, climbing that ladder in a big corporation. It just didn't quite sit well with me. So I went straight from working there for about a year to wanting to start my own business. Quickly realised after a couple of months I had no idea what I was doing. Initially I wanted to get into fashion, and before I sort of made any silly mistakes, my dad actually, he got me a ticket to a seminar, and that was with a company called Global One Events at the time. And Dad used to always sort of follow different educational seminars like that, and this one I think was around building property portfolios and investments. And so my brother and I went there, and ironically, when I was looking for work within marketing, so I knew I wanted to get into digital marketing, that same company, a marketing manager or coordinator job popped up on Seek. So I thought, okay, that's ironic, just calling to an event there. I've quit my job at Foxtel, and here I am looking for work and wanting to understand the digital world without, having theory marketing background, but no practical skills. So fortunately, I was able to bullshit my way through the interview and get the job. Thanks, Greg. He's actually, we still talk very much today. And look, that job taught me a lot about entrepreneurism, just marketing in general, building businesses. We threw lots of events there at Global One, and I think one year we put on about plus like 200 events in 1 year. So a lot of those events, we had to obviously fill the room and market that event. And it was almost like, forming a new business and collapsing it every time they put a new event on.
What about, so what do you, because I find that that's a really interesting thing for me, is like, what about that business taught you a lot? Is it the kind of rigorous nature of it where it's, very fast paced? Because I feel like you can learn a lot about culture and actually developing people and the type of people that you want to bring into your company from those kind of experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I formed a lot of principles that the Greg at the time, who owned the company, instilled into that business. And I think you're dead right. It was a lot of fast moving stuff, a lot of quick decisions. He would sort of come into the office and be like, we're throwing an event next week. We've got to, get the website up and get speakers on, and, we need 1,000 registrants. And so just the fast moving decision making, but also the ability just to think quick and strategize, what customers are wanting, and being topical in the environment as well. There was 3 sections in the business, and this is how it was split. There was personal development. One speaker in particular that they had an exclusive relationship with was Dr. John Demartini. Yep. So I was able to expose myself a lot with personal development. The second area was business wealth, and then the third area was property investment. So naturally, 3 big core of what you do in life, right? And yeah, I think like the ability just to think of, okay, what's hot in property right now, and how do we form an event around that? And then we'd work with a copywriter to come up with buzzwords in the headlines, and then I would then able to build that sort of web page and landing page out, and have to get as many registrations as possible. Didn't matter where it came from. I just had to find where the audience and the traffic was sitting at the time. Back then, Facebook ads was taking off. It was around 2010 to 12. I think I got the job around 2012. So naturally, I had to learn myself of how to fill this event, whether it was banner advertising, JV emails, Facebook advertising. So naturally, I just learned a lot about where audience sits and how to find that traffic, and how to step into the customer's shoes and sort of get them and persuade them to come to an event. So that's where I learned a lot of building a business, how a business operates in a small capacity, and also digital marketing, and not just digital marketing, but direct response advertising and marketing. And sort of that was the sort of leading cause, or not cause, but that's where I learned most of what I needed to know to have the capacity to then start GMS. And it was the owner at the time that sort of was pushing me to go and do it. After I left that company, he was sort of like, you should start a consulting brand, because the one thing we did really well, despite some events not, profiting for the business, was marketing. And that was the essence of that company, was how to market really well and how to turn things around really quickly. And that's where JMS was born. Started consulting, and then found a business partner who was a copywriter at the time, and JMS sort of evolved into what it is today.
So tell us a little bit about the early days then. So I find it interesting, you whenever you think about how a business starts, it's one person with an idea, maybe two, or a group of partners in a sense.
Yeah.
What was the process from there, So how did you go from 2 to 5 people?
Yep.
And what was that process like for you guys? And what were some of the challenges that you faced during those times, the natural ones that you see, like capital, being able to get, recruitment in the early days is, a lot of people tend to venture off or they get attracted to these larger companies, but in the early days you have to find ways to get great people in your team. Like, what were some of the challenges you guys faced, and can you talk a little bit about how you took the company from, say, just the idea to what it is now?
So, I mean, it's a common saying, but never check out of a hotel until you have the next room booked. When I started consulting, I didn't just go full-time into it. I actually had another job at a tech company called Meltwater. It was PR, analytical monitoring, sort of like Google Alerts. I was fortunate enough to get that job simultaneously as I was starting to consult post working at that event firm. And that sort of was a journey of about a year and a half. Initially, I was full-time with that business, and then I was consulting on the side at nights, weekends, had a couple of clients here and there from just family friends, a couple of which were decent brands as well. So yeah, it was quite a chaotic year, balancing working full-time still, consulting on the side, trying to build my business. And I was also helping out my family pub at the time, working 3 days a week, Monday night, Friday night, Saturdays. So it was a full-on year. I think it was 2016.
How did you do that? So that's an interesting kind of piece to the puzzle that I find. Like I did the same thing with what we're doing now. Is how did you manage that? Like, were you selling at night, delivering in the mornings, like how do you manage consulting? Because it is quite a hands-on business and can be quite time consuming. Yeah,
well, luckily I'm naturally pretty organized. I think that is probably like one of the most important things when you have a business, is to be organized and have systems to allow automation and systemization. Back then, today there's a lot more systems out there to help us run a business, but back then, and not to say that there wasn't back then, but I had simple little project management tools. I had a VA that did a lot of my development work for landing pages, because when I first started out, it was literally just doing lead gen on Facebook for local businesses. So a lot of that was funnel builds, and running ads and having to build a full funnel for clients. And yeah, I think juggling those 3 different things in 1 year, I knew there was an expiration on it. I know it wasn't sustainable, but I also knew that this is something I have to do to sort of see which direction I need to go in, whether that was working in my family business and going down that path, whether that was continuing to work for that tech business, or whether that was succeeding in my consulting and starting a business out of it. And I naturally found on the days, because I ended up going part-time because something had to give eventually. My boss at the time was like, no, absolutely not. But I was fortunate that I had the only job in APAC at that company, which was onboarding. I was an onboarder for the platform that we were selling, which was Meltwater. And I was basically training people that would buy the software on how to use it, and being that first impression of the tech company from sales to account management. So I was the only one doing that, which allowed me to have a bit more freedom than other departments. Say in sales, it probably wouldn't have been possible, or account management, when you're already dealing with lots of clients, then consulting on the side, that would be quite difficult. So I was in a sort of a unique situation in order to do that. And yeah, I think I found myself waking up on the days going to work for that tech company and just, having to force myself to do the job, versus the days where I was working on my business and consulting. I was just getting up and doing it straight away and not really having to be pushed or motivated to do it. So that's when I realized, okay, that's where I want to, that's the direction I need to head. But I wasn't just going to quit that job and go do it without any capital. We've always been self-funded, so it took about a year for us to get enough clients to be stable enough, and then made the decision to go full time in 2017. But it took about a year and a half to make that decision. And naturally, again, working at the pub, I just found that my brother is the one that sort of heads that up at the moment. That it was something that I loved. Hospitality is great, but again, just felt like I needed to go on my own path and do that. So I think that's the biggest lesson there. Never check out of a hotel until you got the next room booked.
And what was the expiration? So was it capital? Was it literally like, okay, the company is now making enough money for me to step away and actually go into this full time? Like, how did you navigate that process of working a lot of jobs to then going all in and full time into the role?
I figured if I could replace my salary at the time with clients and then some, taking into account expenses with the business, then that's a pretty good starting point to go and run my own show. And I think I ended up tripling my salary through the business within about a year. And that was pretty evident that, okay, there's something on here, and having a few clients, and naturally, it started to hinder on the performance of my other jobs, and they saw that, they knew that. We had a pretty open conversation of like, okay, let's have a chat when it becomes a problem, and it did. Results started dissipating at that other job, so that's when I thought it was only fair to make the decision to go in one direction or the other. But I think definitely the simplest thing, if you're starting out, certainly have some sort of financial backing to before you do it. I'm not talking about getting investment, but don't quit your job until you validate the product or service. And that was something we did. We validated the service. We were getting a lot of natural organic flow happening. And I was able to triple or quadruple my salary within about 6 months from really giving it a crack. And then as soon as we went full time, I never looked back.
Awesome. And so when you say like quadruple your salary, are you talking about the income the business earns? I find that's a really interesting piece of the puzzle. Is it like, because we're probably now looking at that next phase, which is like, okay, you now have 12 team members. At what point did you start to hire? What was the trigger for that?
Yep.
Were you taking money, as income out of the business? Were you taking a lower salary? Like, what was that process like?
I certainly took a step back. I mean, even going from, full-time to part-time in that other company I worked at, I had to take a cut in order to, work in my job, in my company, I should say. But I don't mean quadrupling my salary. I meant the money that the business was making was about 3 or 4 times what I was getting paid working for the other job. So in terms of how, to structure it just without myself, I had a business partner at the time. He decided that it wasn't for him when we ended up going full time with it. Literally from quitting my other job to then going full time, the initial business partner ended up leaving. Then I thought, oh wow, this is not great. I've just quit my job, and my business partner's just gone, nah, I can't be bothered anymore. He I think he had his second kid at the time, so he had his hands full. And he had other stuff going on as well. He's a very successful copywriter. But funny enough, I had a good friend of mine that was sort of helping me out build it, and he was just contracting with me. And then when my original business partner left, I actually said to him, mate, do you want to join me on this quest? We can be partners, and can't promise you anything in the beginning, but if you want to stick it out, then there might be something here for you. So myself and my business partner Simon, is still my business partner today. We went full time with it in 2017, and we initially, in terms of first hires, we just did, I think, that first year on our own with a couple of VAs. So it was very much a lifestyle business in the beginning. We didn't go really hard into it. We didn't have investment, so there was not a lot of pressure. And I think it was just a lot of weight off our shoulders to actually have freedom, and enjoy that freedom. But the biggest thing that really, I think, built the safety and security around the business in the beginning was joining a business club called Cub, so Club of United Business. I'm still a member there today. And that was just, again, a coincidence of having a client, one of my family friends at the time. He co-founded Vision. I was working with him, and he lived above Cub in Sydney, and he goes, you got to check out this business club for business owners. And Daniel Hakim, the owner, at the time I was only 20 28. I think he was only 24 or 5. I hardly even had a business, and he, sort of saw a lot of potential and allowed me to become a member, and I built a lot of network and clients out of that hub. So that sort of allowed me to work out of that facility in Sydney, without the pressure, still having the culture whilst meeting people. So yeah, that was really the cornerstone to having that sort of comfort and security going out on my own.
And so then you mentioned the word structure, which plays a massive role in how a business grows.
Yeah.
When you got, and in the first year you mentioned that, it was kind of you two probably delivering a lot of the product, very customer facing.
Yeah.
A few VAs in the back end, helping support and deliver the product. What was that next kind of evolution of, all right, we now need to make a decision, we now need to take it to the next level? What were some of those first hires that you brought in? Were you did you guys continue to deliver the product and wrap some of the other kind of segments of the business, like say bring people into your own marketing team? What were kind of some of those first hires and why did you make those decisions? And then, even looking at some of the strategies that you used in the early days to really, expand and drive growth.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing that I see a lot of business owners having, and even people coming into a company and, leading a team, is delegation. I was wearing all the hats in the beginning. So bringing the clients on, running the campaigns, managing the VAs, building the website, finance, HR, everything. I mean, HR wasn't really around then, but naturally had to sort of fit into that position of wearing all those hats. And then I had to teach my business partner how to sort of do all that to then naturally progress a lot of work over to him. And yeah, it's just one of those things where no matter who you're giving it to, that they're not going to do 100% of the job that you're currently doing. They might eventually get there, but you just have to sort of rip that Band-Aid off, let them, make mistakes and learn, but build processes around that. So you're not telling someone over and over again, the same instructions, and that's where processes and systems come into place. Our first hire, major hire at the time, was, I think at the start of 2017, we had a few VAs, Simon and myself, and a couple of contractors. First full-time person we hired was actually a rep from Facebook. He's actually our account director today. I don't know if you've spoken to reps at Facebook, but because we were working across multiple accounts, back then you get assigned to a rep at Facebook per ad account. And the ad account, funny enough, that we got assigned to for this particular rep was the Cubs ad account. And I was doing some marketing for Cub at the time to get leads for more members. And this particular rep was just, outstanding. He sort of would call me up randomly, see if I needed any help with the campaigns, and I think I just threw it out there. I'm like, it was in New Zealand too. So
how'd you pitch him? Was it on the phone?
It was on the phone. I think it was actually on a boat. It was one of the Cub days because Cub throws lots of little social events. I think I was actually on a boat and he called me up and I was like, mate, I'm sort of out at the moment. You don't need to call me, but that's awesome. I go, also, we're looking for, a Facebook marketer that can join the business. Do you know anyone that might be interested in your network, given that, you're working at Facebook? I think it was a third party at the time that Facebook contracts out to. And he was like, yeah, I'd be interested. And I'm like, no way. I'm like, you sure? He's like, yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah. I'm like, that we're just starting out. He's like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, okay. But yeah, what I didn't know that whole contracted company that Facebook was using in New Zealand, naturally, I think they ended up making redundant. So that a lot of jobs were sort of open with people that were sort of working for Facebook. Anyway, he ended up joining us, and given that we already knew his skills, we were just able to have that virtual relationship. And yeah, he was absolutely like a turning point in the business, having that like skill set outside of myself, and then also teaching Simon. The three of us were able to do a fair bit of damage, without having to train people. And we still didn't know a lot about running a business. I was great at Facebook and I was naturally a marketer. He was able just to provide that support that we needed to then go, cool, let's build this shit out.
Do you have to replace the product first? is in delivering the product. Is that the first hire that every startup has to make?
I always thought if you have to be there to run the business and to deliver the service, then it's not a business. It's a high-paid consulting job. And naturally, because I was consulting a lot, I just felt like I had to remove myself from the equation as fast as possible in order for it to become a business. And my face was attached to the brand, and still is, but very much so was attached to the brand, that they didn't want to speak to anybody else, because everyone was like, go speak to Blake. You want Facebook ads, go speak to Blake. So it took a bit of time. I'd get comments back going, oh, look, such and such is doing a poor job, we want you. And I'm like, well, it's just not. I'm not going to step in just because you want to. And, it did take a while to fully remove myself, but yeah, I do feel that and another thing as well, it's not about just hiring talent. I think that the systems and processes build a business, and the people drive it. And that was a big learning for us as well. Although, Matthew, our account director, is an absolute wizard, we can't clone him. The more we grow, we need more Matthews. But the systems and operations are able to deliver a sort of approach to scale the business. And that's what we spent a lot of time during COVID on building, because we ran the business very much just from our own skill set and in our heads, until we realized, when we'd bring on an influx of clients, we'd always have cracks form. So having systems, having project management systems, CRMs, things to automate mundane tasks, having virtual assistants, all that stuff is very important before you start scaling and bringing on hundreds of clients.
Yeah, because it's profitability, right? Like, I think that's one of the realizations even for me, is like, you can have amazing people, but if you're trying to grow a business beyond a small group of people, inevitably the more, and you mentioned it before, the more organized you are and the more processes and systems you have in place, once you get to say 12 people or 15 people or 20 people, the difference is an unorganized group of 20 people might generate 10% profit.
That's right.
Whereas a really organized group of people can probably push to that 25-30% mark, which is a great business,
yep.
Especially in the service field that we know, So
absolutely,
that's a great point, and absolutely love that.
Yeah.
What were some other things in the early days that you guys leveraged to really grow the business, or potential strategies that you used that really made a massive difference in, say, that jump from, the three of you with some VAs to maybe, the 10 kind of people or person mark?
I think a lot of the past experience I had with those several jobs I mentioned, I took a lot from those and took different pieces and elements from all those learnings into building the business, as did my business partner Simon. He had a very similar background in media buying. So I think leveraging, all those skill sets and learnings, but also a lot of it came, again, going back to that event company that I worked at. I think the fact that we're able to leverage a lot of the coaching space at the time, and I naturally was surrounded by that. So fortunately, a lot of the speakers that we worked with at that event company, we naturally ended up bringing on board just from referrals, and just knowing that, I was sort of working at that company now, running ads for clients, because I was just running ads for that company, not clients at the time. We had a lot of organic referrals coming through from that, and sort of built a bit of a niche within the coaching space. And then once you get a few on, naturally, it's because it is a small sort of industry. A lot of other coaches started to hit us up. Outside of that, again, I've already mentioned it, but outside of that, I think one of the biggest, incubators for building the brand and having a natural flow of clients and just referrals was having that business club. So being surrounded by a network of other business owners. So I think the mix of myself being able to do a few seminars and actually get up and speak on stage with some of our clients. One of our clients took me over to London. I was speaking on stage. We developed, some products around, Facebook advertising and education, being around Cub and having a network to leverage. And then doing our own marketing, practicing what we preached. We didn't run an ad for the first year in business, but when we started to, then we started to get new clients coming to us. And that was the biggest, that was actually probably the hardest nut to crack, was cool, we can get referrals, we can leverage our network, we can leverage, Cub as a business club, but like getting someone who doesn't know us into, our database and getting them on board, that was probably the hardest thing to do. But once we cracked that, that's when we knew we had a brand on our hands.
Because that's the next step, right? That's where I always feel like the first iteration of business is proving your product.
Yes.
Making sure it's valuable. And you need to do that in the early days. Like, you don't want to over market your service, and if you're selling a horrible product that no one finds valuable, or it's not, you're not doing it at a good level, and it's not proven, and you only really get that by kind of increasing the flywheel all the time, where you've always got some leads coming in through word of mouth. But I think the next iteration is always like, okay, how do we double or triple our volume?
Yeah.
And that comes from your marketing, which is really interesting that you say that.
Yeah. Your family are your biggest supporters, but you can't build a big business on your family and friends, can you?
Exactly.
And nor do you want to sell to your friends. I actually, as much as I like to help all my close friends and family, I don't want a full book of family and friends, naturally. If anything, I sort of like to do it for free, as bad as that sounds.
It's interesting. Like, it's one of those things in the beginning, you have to do it.
You have to.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to, because they will be your first customers.
Yeah.
And you need to, again, like, you can't prove your product unless you're actually delivering it for customers.
Yeah.
You can talk about it all you want, but
your mate will forgive you.
Exactly.
If you burn it,
Exactly. And then it's, it's really interesting that you say that, is that next iteration is always about, how do I increase volume? And always that does come down to, your marketing activities, and kind of how do you take that next step? What is that next step for you in terms of marketing activities? And
that's right.
I think there's an interesting relationship between, like, founder, like, yourself stepping out, and your partner having to deliver the product, so that you can go do a lot of those things. You can go sell a little bit more. You can go do events. You can network. You can start to, execute some of those activities, which is always, again, something that you have to do as that next iterative step.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's right.
Mate, we're going to shift.
Cool.
Marketing. 2023, what's happening?
Far out. What a complicated world we live in right now. Look, I think the biggest shift that we found over the years, it's definitely like the creative element. I think TikTok has definitely influenced a lot about how we consume media online. I'm speaking more from a social media perspective at the moment. I'm finding that the boycott of Facebook is sort of a theme at the moment, but also just people growing up with Facebook. There's probably not a lot of new adopters. The sort of market of Facebook, we're all sort of aging, and there's this new generation now on TikTok. And I think the way that we consume media has literally shifted overnight. Back in the day when I was first running Facebook ads, you could literally jump on the stock library of Facebook, and I'd be working with Vision PT at the time, and I would just type in personal trainer lifting weights and get a stock image up, and literally just have apply today for a free membership or free trial, and that would be it. Very simple. And because there wasn't a lot of saturation and competition back then on Facebook ads, you'd able to cut through the clutter pretty quickly. Fast forward to today, there's a lot of the barrier to entry is literally, it's so easy to create websites. It's very easy to build a business. You can slap together, a landing page and call yourself a business by a domain overnight almost. So there's a lot of distrust happening right now online. There's a lot of scammers, a lot of people who, are claiming lots of outlandish things and, get 30x in 30 days sort of thing, and it's ruining it for a lot of other people. So I think there's natural distrust right now in the marketplace online, which then forces us to get better at marketing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Competition creates quality and improvement in what we do and what we practice. So this whole TikTok revolution, fast moving, motion graphics and reels is really what's happening right now, and it's making it a little bit harder for an advertiser or brand to to keep on top of everything, right? We've got Facebook's ecosystem, we've got TikTok's ecosystem, then we have Google, then we've got programmatic. Like, there's a lot out there and a lot to get confused by. I guess it makes our job as an agency a lot more important because people just can't be bothered to keep up with everything, and we have to naturally as an agency. But I think this year, we're going to see a lot of privacy first. Obviously, that's already been rolled out with iOS. I know Meta have just launched their verification, subscription, just like Twitter has. So that'll be interesting to see, the cause and effect of that. I think TikTok's going to be something that, everyone has to watch. It's very much an organic platform still today. I think the advertising part of it's still in its infancy, but that's going to be a powerhouse. And I think things are naturally going to move that way for sure.
Is Facebook dead?
Definitely not dead. It is.
Is it dying?
Whether you say it's dying is another question. I think there will always be a place for Meta, and I think it will evolve because, let's face it, Mark's a switched-on guy. People are still using Instagram. I use Instagram every day. I don't really use TikTok. So I think with Web3, there's going to be more ecosystems and I think splintering happening versus back in the day we had the one platform, the one news feed. So everyone's battling all these different opinions on the one news feed, and it created chaos. So I feel that's where Web3 and this whole revolution is going to lead us, is more splintering and more breakouts, more sort of niche communities where people have a similar mindset or a similar way of thinking, or whatever it is. It's going to be more segmented, I feel.
And so you mentioned something before. In the current world today, is the focus more on creative?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned before, you could go get a stock image, whereas now it's a totally a totally different world, and the creative is really important. Is that kind of where you?
I think so. I've from advertising over 10 years now. I feel the creative is a very more important piece, and it always has been. It's always been important, but it was hard to create good creative 10 years ago. Now it's we have Canva and all these different systems, and a lot of very skilled videographers out there that we can leverage. And we partner with lots of different creative agencies and contractors, and we've got our own content sort of department now as well. And you can't have one without the other. I think like the three most important things when it comes to creating a good marketing campaign online is obviously the overall strategy, the copywriting, and the creative outside of the placement, because anyone can really place an ad. It's set up in order for anyone to place an ad, and that's what social media platforms are doing to monetize, is to try and make it as easy as possible for anyone to go on and create an ad. So I think the creative element, people need to spend more time on having thought-provoking messaging, tapping into their customers' needs and emotions, and not just being lazy and slapping an ad together and trying to sell. It just doesn't work anymore.
Team, if you're loving this episode and you want to help support the show so that we can continue to grow and share the wisdom of amazing individuals, please remember to go hit the subscribe button. You have no idea how much it helps us. Team, just a short break. I want to say a massive shout out to our major sponsors, BizCover. They are a big reason why we get to do what we do every single week. These guys are professionals. They care about your business, and they care about the business and startup community, which is something that I really love and a reason why we chose to partner with them. And plus, they make the process of getting your company insured super seamless, which is really important with such a tedious process. I've been a customer now for 10 years. I have made claims. It has been super easy. As I said, with such a tedious process, these guys are the best in the business. As part of the Startup Diaries community, they have given us a promo code, which is Pivotal25, getting $25 off your business insurance policy. Make sure you head over to bizcover.com.au. The link is in the show notes. Get your company insured with a great company. We'll head back to the episode now. A client comes in, how are we marketing their business? Like what I really want to do is give our audience and our community an understanding as to kind of how you think about marketing, and more importantly, a takeaway for them to go away. And if they're a startup, if they're a new company, how do they market their business, in right now, like in the modern age with how things are changing, how are you thinking about it, and what do you think they should do?
Yeah, there's sort of three pillars that we structure and how GMS is structured and what we look at when bringing new business on as well. And yeah, look, to be honest with you, there's a lot of brands and businesses that come to us that are simply just not ready to start advertising. And I think this is the most important thing to know when starting out, is to have a timeline of events. And the first thing you do when building a business is come up with a strategy, like what is the product or service and what problem are you trying to solve. And we get some brands coming to us and they've just slapped a website together. There's no organic traffic. They haven't built any following. There's no database, and they go, we want to start advertising. It's like, well, no, take a bit of a step back. You're not ready. And I think it's important to know that advertising is not the answer to all your problems. I think it's typically the last piece of the puzzle. There's so much more that goes into building a business, and not just doing all those bits and pieces, like building a website, having an engaged following, posting organically, doing collabs and partnerships, all those things that you need to do to build a brand and prove the product or service first before you go out and start spending money. Like we mentioned before, validate your product or service. If you haven't validated your product service and your friends are buying it and you go and start pumping thousands of dollars on ads, you're going to be throwing a lot down the drain, because things change over time. Marketing is trial and error. You're going to get things wrong. And I think like there's a lot of systems out there to leverage to, get a good creative done, to get a good website done, to build a good funnel, CRMs out there with email automations and all that sort of jazz. So there's a lot at our fingertips, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think, there's that saying of just, jump off a cliff and build a plane on the way down. I do think that now, because there is so much clutter and saturation, that we do need to spend a little bit more time on developing a good product or service before we start giving it to the masses.
So your 3 pillars, or like if we were to say, how do you generate a lead?
Yeah.
How does that get done? So like, let's say you are that company. I want to touch on 2 things here. I want to go, okay, so we talked about being ready. How do I get ready?
Yeah.
Right? Like what do I need to do, and kind of how do you look at that process? And then number 2 is, I'm ready. What am I now doing? Yeah.
So there's owned media, and there's earned media. So let's start with your owned media. So your owned media is your website, it's your database, it's everything that you own as a business. That's where you should get started first, I think. Not spending hours and hours on a website. I think, depending on if you are an e-commerce business, obviously you're going to need to get a good website done. If you're a service business, get a good landing page done. You don't necessarily need a website. But I think you need to have, your owned media validated and set in place before you start advertising. So the 3 pillars that we work with is, all your websites, your tech and automation parts, all your back end of your business. There's no point sending traffic to a website if there's leaks and if there's no retention strategy in the back end with emails. All that stuff needs to be humming before you start driving a lot of traffic to it. So, and that's the natural way you should be building a business, getting all that stuff done first. And then, you can't run an ad without having creative content, whether that's getting a photo shoot done, getting videos done. Obviously, if you're a product, there's a lot of product shots you need, influencers, and not just influencers today, but TikTok has created a shift of getting people who have a following to now getting people who are good at creating content. So the creator marketplace, I think, is now a really, really important element that people need to start thinking of, is not looking for people with big following, but looking for people that can just create great content and showcase your brand, and getting really good user-generated content for your brand as well. It's not a matter of just getting some stock images or a photo shoot done and calling that creative content, and that's all you need. It's having a mix of imagery, it's having a mix of storytelling through videos, and having a mix of user-generated content to showcase customers using or trying on your product.
Because that's what TikTok's done, in my opinion. It's taken the focus away from followers. Followers
100%.
mean nothing on TikTok.
That's right.
Coming from we have 100,000 of them.
Yeah.
Means nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, it gives you a good kickstart with your content, but you still can have a piece of content that will only get 1,000 views.
Yeah.
And I think you're right with that. It's opened up the playing field a bit, where you can go to someone who has 0 followers, be like, wow, they've got potential, and they create really engaging content. And then the idea isn't just them posting a link to your website to drive the traffic there. It's about, I feel like TikTok's added this another layer now where your user-generated content says a lot about your product.
That's right. Yeah, 100%.
And you know, in my opinion, I'd love to get your take on this, is really what we're seeing is the friction between product and media or content and attention is being evaporated, right? So, you know, you look at TikTok Shop, it's not here in Australia yet, but you see a lot of these platforms, that kind of middle piece, you know, not the website's dying or disappearing, but it's, you know, I feel like there's the friction between, say, product being bought and the attention that's being generated through media and entertainment
100%
is just being evaporated,
Yep.
you know, and the user experience is becoming a lot better for the end consumer. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think, 100%. I think you need both elements there. It's not. I don't think it's one or the other. I think for a product, 100%. And apps and platforms are creating these shopping experiences so users spend more time on the app. It makes sense, right? They don't want people to go off-site to someone's website. And hence the whole cookieless world is driving this need for apps to make users spend more time on their platform. So, you know, Facebook have their own shopping experience. They've got their own, you know, lead forms now. They've been around forever, but there's been some updates with lead forms. You can literally create a landing page experience as a lead form now. So you don't really need to, you know, build a whole funnel and get development done. So yeah, you don't really, you know, and that's probably eating my own words I said before, you don't actually really need a website to begin with. You can test your product or service without spending hours on a website. I mean, obviously as a product, you're going to need a website to facilitate organic traffic and, you know, to you know, get SEO working and all that jazz. So it's not a replacement, it's a complementary tool that we have at our disposal. And a good way to test your product or service without, you know, the one mistake I had from building a business is I probably spent weeks and months on end, if I accumulated the hours on building a website that was crap at the end of the day, you know,
Yeah.
and I've had my time back. I probably wouldn't have even, you know, spent time on doing so. So when I say owned media, doesn't necessarily mean, you know, spending all this time and money on a website. It's just having things in place that will support all the stuff you're doing on the platform. So you're not reliant on just that platform, because platforms change. So the three pillars, it's your owned media. It's all that stuff, building your database, your customers, it's basically your database, right? And then, you know, your creative content, which is all the attention that you need to then make the earned media work. And that's where advertising comes into play. And treating platforms like a vehicle. You know, vehicles come and go. Facebook isn't going to be around forever. TikTok might not be around forever either, but following where the attention is and the audience sits in order to drive people through your earned media all the way through to your owned media.
Yeah, 100%. So like an easy way for people to think about that is what owned media is what you own and
Yep.
what no one can take away from you.
That's right,
You know,
100%.
so if you build a database of emails, that's yours. No
That's
one
right.
can take that away from you as long as you don't fucking lose it, which you shouldn't. But that's what you own. It's the same with your website. You know, that's yours.
Yes.
And then your earned media is like a following on Instagram. It's like, you know, your engagement on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's all these kind of platforms that change all the time, and
Yeah.
algorithms change, and all these things you can't really control. You can only adapt.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're talking about in terms of your earned media.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's not a matter of just trying to, you know, pick one platform. It's a matter of, like I said, what's suitable for that particular product or service at the time and where your customers are sitting. You know, we're omni-channel. We don't just focus on the one, even though we did at the start. That's how we started. We got really good at one of them. But now we spread advertising across to Pinterest, even Snapchat. People think Snapchat's dead. That's still very much alive.
That's a big one.
You know, and Snapchat I think they've like set some sort of record with their user base. So it's still growing, which would surprise a lot of people.
I think it's the second fastest growing platform.
There you go. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure TikTok's the fastest.
Yeah.
And they're not as big as Facebook and Instagram, of course, but they're they're growing at a much faster rate, and it's because of the younger generation.
And I think because this whole Web3 evolution, they were ahead of their time with AI and their filters and stuff. Now that that's starting to be more prominent, it's, people are starting to adopt it again. I use it a lot. A lot of my friends, I actually logged in the other day and there's nothing going on in my app at all. But yeah, I think there's a lot more new adopters to it. And that's probably the younger generation getting on board with it, perhaps.
If you speak to a 15-year-old, they don't know what Instagram is.
No.
And that sounds wild.
Yeah.
They don't use it.
Because their parents are on it. They don't want to be one where their
TikTok,
parents are.
Snapchat are the two big ones.
Yeah.
So that's another really interesting kind of thing that's at play. I find.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then outside of creative, we got this whole Chat GPT thing taking off, which again is gonna. I don't know. It's going to create a lot of opportunities. A lot of people are scared of it, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to leverage it. I don't know how we're going to, but yeah, being able to have that at your disposal to pump out content, and again, it's a complementary thing. I don't think people should be scared of AI. I think how do you leverage that to sort of build a better business and better user experience?
Yeah, and so let's talk about ads then. So ads is an interesting one. Like obviously we talked about Facebook and what's happening there. How are you seeing ads playing out, and where are you guys shifting your focus as an agency? Because you guys have to be on top of this stuff. So where's your focus going currently, and not only currently, but where do you think it'll be in a year's time? Yeah,
so we've got what we consider 3 families of platforms that we use to spread our clients' budget. Number 1, social media. Number 2 is search engines, and number 3 is display, so i.e. programmatic. That's where a lot of banner advertising, but you can even place digital billboards programmatically now. So we're starting to go into that space. So that's sort of the digital ecosystem from an advertising point of view digitally. In terms of where we feel advertising is going, a lot of our spend's still going towards Meta. The thing that people should realize is that there's been so much iteration and change and money put into Meta's business manager ad platform that it's very hard for another platform like TikTok to quickly adopt that. And there's a lot of granular data that Meta has that TikTok doesn't have yet. TikTok probably only has, when you're setting up a profile, name, email, location. I don't know. I don't use TikTok, but there's probably only a certain amount of fields there that TikTok has about you. Obviously, your engagement on TikTok's a different story. That's when they can start understanding your preferences and your behaviors. But when you go over to Meta, think about the amount of information that you give Meta when you're building your own profile. It's like job, location, books you read, it's age, it's where you've traveled, checking into places. There's so much data there that still makes it quite a behemoth and leader in the game when it comes to ads. Meta is still something that you shouldn't ignore. Still somewhere where a lot of our budget is going towards. But of course, if results start declining to the point where it doesn't make sense for the advertiser to be on, we'll move over to the next most logical platform for that business. Right now, social media, in terms of where we can, I guess, diversify, the biggest 2 or 3 would be probably Pinterest, and going in order, TikTok, Pinterest and Snapchat would probably be the sort of alternatives there. And then search engine, we do a lot with Google, YouTube, Google Display, a lot of remarketing. Bing's back on the map now because of the whole API, Chat GPT thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, a bit of display, I think, is also, for the bigger brands to be able to tap into a lot of banner advertising, and also go into digital billboards, which is fascinating.
What's a digital billboard?
So think of, we got a partner, Broadsign. They're a technology solution that basically have a system that has upwards of 90% plus inventory of all billboards in Australia, where you can literally place a digital billboard. So you go in a supermarket and you see the screen's changing.
Yeah.
But it's not just a supermarket. You've got bus stops, you've got bathrooms, you've got dentist clinics. There's so many different places where these billboards pop up, and you can literally go and create a campaign and choose your location, your age, your demographic, some interests as well, and it'll spit out where sort of your customers would be moving through, and you can place a campaign, and if it's not working, you can pull it. Versus 10, 20 years ago, you'd have to literally print the picture and paste it up, and it's stuck there for months. You got some movie premieres, and I might say like launching January, and next it's like March, and it's still up there. They just leave it up there because the next advertiser hasn't bought that space. So you've got all these old billboards just sitting there. So this digital billboard sort of revolution is fascinating because you're able to place media. It's the same way as you'd place a Facebook ad. It's pretty cool.
I guess a question that I would have is like, you obviously have all of these different channels. What makes a great ad? Like a really, like in a simple format, if you're someone who is wanting to run ads, or you've got all these different channels, what is the common theme? What is the commonality between what makes a great ad across all of these channels?
Good question. The product or service has to be great first. If the product or service is not great, it doesn't matter how good you are at advertising, it's just not going to work. Outside of that, if the product or service is great and has a niche, what it comes down to is that ad tapping into the customer's shoes and their emotions, and not just, for instance, an agency. There's so many agencies out there talking about how good they are and, claiming what they can do for your brand, but they're not really talking about the customer's needs and wants. So I feel what makes a great ad is having a point of difference, and having a story that they can convey that taps into our emotions. Because when you think about it, marketing and the psychology of marketing doesn't ever change. It's always about customers' emotions and how a product or service can help solve that. The psychology should always remain the same. Obviously, the fundamentals and the structure from a platform point of view changes. But what makes a great ad today is literally just thought-provoking content that taps into the customer's emotions. And I think if you can understand your customer as a brand, that's when you win the market. Just focusing more on your customer, giving a shit about them, I think is really, it's that simple.
Yeah, I think that's why media's had such a big part in the last 12 to 18 months. I think that's what TikTok, the platform, has done, with media first, entertainment first.
Yep.
Like it's not much of a networking platform, is it? You don't go there for networking, you go there for entertainment.
True.
And I feel like that's what's changed in marketing. If I look at more of a macro picture, is even with podcasts, podcasts are blowing up because you listen to a podcast because it connects with you emotionally. Like I listen to the All In podcast, it's my favorite one. I don't miss a single episode, and it's 4 billionaires talking about business and investing and macroeconomics and politics, but having banter as well. And
cool.
So I really connect with that. I'm interested in these things, but I connect with them emotionally. I share the same beliefs as them. And so I think what media has done is that, in a sense. It's kind of like, as a company, I feel like you're forced to do that now. You're forced to wrap some sort of entertainment or media around your business so that you can connect emotionally, as well as having a great product or service that fulfills or meets certain needs and frustrations. But people, I think and maybe TikTok's driven this, but it is that next iteration of, okay, well, not only do they need to have a great service, or a great product, but I actually need to like them too.
Yes.
And there is this emotional connection that I need to share with the company. And that's why I think the first iteration really of the creator economy was influencers and creators, and them coming in and being really good at that, like your Logan Pauls, your Kim Kardashians, your Mr. Beast, these kind of guys having such success, with their businesses post connecting with customers. I think the next iteration is brands. Is the bigger brands coming in, 100%. Forcing them, like starting a podcast or doing interview series or wrapping their company with media so that they can connect with customers on the same level.
And I think that's a good point there. I think we've almost gone 360. It's the focus now. It's about the brand more than getting a result on an ad, or any marketing campaign. I think like when Facebook was in its peak and were able to track a dollar-to-dollar return, people were just so focused on getting the result. They didn't care. They neglected the brand. It went so far off brand guidelines that it just did not matter what it looked like, so long as you get a result. Now, due to iOS, cookieless world, not able to track as easily, people are going back to building a great brand, and focusing on other mediums, as you said, like podcast, tapping into their organic network and giving a shit about their customers again. I think we sort of lost that. So in a way, silver lining with what's happening with this privacy first world is that it's what making business owners and brands work harder on focusing on their brand and caring about their customers and finding other ways to generate revenue outside of just an ad. And I find that quite fascinating. And I'm actually all for it. I'm in advertising, but I think it's a great move.
Yeah, it's interesting because like we think about privacy and we think about all these, antitrust and trust in general, but the byproduct of this is literally trust.
Yeah,
right. Like you need to build trust with your customer.
That's literally it.
If you're a brand, how do you do that apart from just delivering a product or service? And that's why I think we've made a big bet on it personally. Like we think media is really important to how you connect with customers, and I think we can see that. But
100%.
I think it's interesting, and I mean, I'm not an advertiser, right? So hearing that from you and kind of me, the way I think about it is, this world really is kind of going to be. I think brands will be forced to produce media, because just like Google reviews and followers probably were previously the producers of trust, they're still going to be there, but I think people want to see your brand's personality as much as well, So yes, I'll go to Google reviews, and that's previously how you maybe figured out what restaurant you want to eat at, but now, my partner doesn't do Google. She does TikTok, and she looks at TikTok and trusts what, say, the most recent influencer has said about this restaurant and wants to see the food, and search is very much happening there as well. So it's an interesting world.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest common thread with brands that have been successful that we've worked with and had the opportunity to work with. Like Culture Kings. Jade Up, I know you had the boys on recently. It's not because of the ads that we've done for them at all. It's like that's the cherry on top. It's all the other stuff that they're doing through collabs, through partnerships, through building communities, through tapping into their database, doing Q&As on Instagram with their followers, giveaways. Like there's so many things that they're doing outside of just an ad. That's why people need to get it out of their heads that the ad is, the bee's knees of their business. It's not. I think if you can get an ad working, then great. That's what we're here for. But there's so much more that you need to have ticking along. And, it's success doesn't come overnight for a lot of people, and people think it does from an ad. And that's just because people ruin it with all these outlandish claims and success stories that you can get from marketing. But I think, you're dead right. Focusing on building your community, building trust with your customers, and just giving a shit about your sort of your brand and your customers as well.
Great insight. Such good insight. Mate, we're going to dive into quickfire now.
Cool.
I always get told off by the community, so I'm not going to preface it. They getting sick of me, so I might get the boot soon. But,
all good.
Mate, what's one piece of advice for your younger self?
Jeez. Invest in Bitcoin. No, I would. If I could talk to my younger self, I would say to him, learn a hobby and stick to it, or a musical instrument and stick to it. The one thing that I sort of did as growing up was, pick one thing up and drop it, pick one thing up and drop it. And I now know a little about a lot, which is great. But I think the one thing that I admire is people's ability to sort of have that consistency with sticking to one thing and build that discipline in their life. I would say stop going out and pick up an instrument, or just do a hobby and sort of have that consistency. It's one thing I've struggled with a lot is just building consistency in my life. I tend to just binge everything. I'll pick something up and just get over it. And look, there's a lot of benefits that comes with that in a business because I, again, know a little about a lot. But I think there's so much more to life, isn't there, than just going out and socialising with your mates. I think learning those good habits from a young age, tends to reap rewards when you're older.
So true. It's so true. I also think there's a good lesson there with like discipline.
Yeah.
But also discipline as an outlet.
Yeah.
Being a business owner, having something outside of your business to work on consistently and have discipline to is a very rewarding and freeing feeling in a sense. I've recently taken up golf and, if I'm stressed, I find business can always bring you a lot of stress, but at the same time, you need to be able to have something else to work on, because
100%.
otherwise you will just get fucking absorbed with it, and it will eat you, and then that will feed into everything else, such as relationships. Being able to just switch the brain to something else.
Yes.
And to get better at something else.
Yeah.
Right. So that you're only, because business is such a wavy fucking process. Like there is
roller
just
coaster.
highs and there is lows.
Yeah.
And in both times, being centered and driven in another facet of your life is something that can be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. I think I had a shoulder operation 1.5 years ago, so I wasn't able to do any sort of activity. It was during COVID as well, lockdown. So I guess it was a bit of a good timing to sort of rest at home. But yeah, I fell into just bad habits, eating poorly, drinking on the weekends because I couldn't go out and physically do things. I'm quite active and was very active growing up. Surf, skate, snowboard, wakeboard, anything with a board attached to it, I'd give it a go. And growing up in Cronulla and being close to the beach, I was sort of lucky to have access to a lot of water sports, and being at a GPS school and having to almost be forced to play sport at school as well. Naturally very active, but yeah, 100%. Without having those outlets, it's very easy just to be sitting on your phone, going to work, come home, watch TV, and then on the weekends go to a pub. Like that's what a lot of society does. You get trapped in those habits, and we're creatures of habit, right? So yeah, building those good, disciplined, sort of focused hobbies or whatever it is when you're younger, and continuing to do them when you get older. It's not an excuse because we're getting older that you can stop doing that. Look, Kelly Slater is 51, still surfing. He's a pro athlete, but there's so many people out there that I know that are in their 60s that are getting out and still surfing and playing golf, whatever it is. But yeah, having something to switch off. I today do a lot of art, so I paint. I try and surf a little bit, but I don't as much as I used to. And yeah, a bit of tennis and golf. So I think if you've got a few things to double between, it definitely helps break up the routine.
Love it. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting a business?
Yeah, I touched on this earlier, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think really think about where you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years, and build something that's going to get you there, rather than thinking of a quick win. I think, younger generation, and we're all at fault of doing it, but this whole immediate gratification from what this fast-moving digital world is presenting us really, I think, cripples, people not building a sort of authentic self. So, I think if business owners, if you're thinking about getting a business, think about something that makes you happy and that you want to keep doing in the next 5 to 10 years, and something that can scale as well. One thing that I've sort of come to terms with is it's great hitting those milestones when you first, build a business and start winning, but having something to scale with as well is very important when, you're 5-10 years down the track. And it's not to say that you have to do one thing for the rest of your life, but iterate as much as you can. Perfection is the enemy of progress, and get out and do it, but don't just do it because someone told you to do it. Have reason behind it.
Love it. That's great advice. I think that's the one thing now. I mean, I've owned businesses for a long time, but I think now that's probably something I'm more aware of. I think it's very hard if you don't have previous training. Like, I never went to uni. I did, but I didn't continue it. I fucking hated it. But
yeah.
I think now...
I forgot all my uni studies anyway.
Yeah, but for me... But that's what I mean. Like, I think when you go through some university degree, especially in business, you do have some sort of formal training there. And I think for me now, more than anything, I think my formal training's just come from trials and tribulations and failures. So now I think that's just something that I'm aware of when I'm building my business, and I've got a plan. I do have a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And I know where I want the business to be in 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and what that will look like. And that's very daunting when you first start a business to be thinking about that. So if you can do some research and understand things such as structure and these kind of things, I think, you can execute to a plan, even though they don't normally go to plan. But so it's a great point.
100%.
What's the most important trait that a founder must have for success, and why?
Geez, thick skin. I think also having the ability to sell is pretty important. I think one thing that, I'm naturally a marketer, probably the one skill set that I didn't master before starting the business that I had to learn throughout having a business was being a good salesperson and learning how to acquire customers. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what anyone says, if you don't know how to bring revenue into a business, then it's going to suffer. Your business will fail. Revenue solves all your problems in a business, and it's the beating heart to the operation of your business. And not to say that you should just be chasing money. I mean, last year we had upwards of 20 people in the team, and we're chasing this crazy figure that we could never quite get to, and as a result created a lot of stress and pressure. So I think, you gotta be able to have thick skin, learn to cop failures on your head really quickly, and learn to take failures as learnings, not failures. I love it when I learn, and if I'm not learning, it gives me anxiety. I actually don't like comfort. That's one thing as well, I think. And I'm not being a business owner or an entrepreneur is certainly not for everybody. There's a lot of people out there I know that are just not suited for it, and nor should they be, and nor do they even want to. There's a lot of pressure, stress. And there's no one telling you what to do when you're running your own business, aside from maybe the ATO and your accountant. But you got to know how to make quick decisions, and I think that's one thing I'm pretty good at, is making quick decisions and sticking to your sort of intuition as well. And being organised is another really important thing. So it's not, there's a few things there. Yeah. It's not just one thing. But I think having thick skin and just being able to get up. If you have a shit day, wake up the next day and just move on with it.
Yeah, thick skin's important. I mean, in a B2B service especially.
Absolutely.
At some point you're going to cop it. So
maybe I picked the wrong industry. Far out. Yeah.
Yeah, you find out that pretty quickly.
Yeah, agencies are tough, man. Yeah, they're not easy.
Yeah. Mate, last thing. Is there a startup story that you look back on that you kind of look back and go, that was wild, or that was like, I can't believe we did that, or I can't believe we went through that you can share? Like, I find that wasn't on the brief, by the way, but I think startups have this, the common theme with a startup is, or when you meet a founder, is there's these stories that you can tell where you get to connect with that individual and you go, wow, like I could tell you a million stories like that. Is there something that comes to mind for you that you think, you just look back and go, far out, like how did that happen?
Our journey?
Yeah, just in general. Like it doesn't have to be like a macro thing. It could just be like a specific story. Maybe it was, some people like Steve Jobs working in his garage type thing.
Yeah. Oh God. It's one I've actually struggled with a bit. People always having adversity with their life or through business, and I've always been a bit nervous. Like, fuck, something's going to happen, because it's everyone says that you're going to go through shit eventually. Look, there's been lots of probably little stories, nothing major. We've had crazy clients, threaten, real nasty stuff to us. Like legal action, blah, blah, blah. And you just got to learn to just go, part ways, you're not for us, here's your money back sort of thing before it gets ugly. So I think we've avoided a lot of hairy situations, naturally through making quick decisions, but also I've always kept my reputation management really close to me. I've always been really careful of that. And I'd much rather part with a client or not win a business if it's going to mean that, that's going to make me lose sleep at night. I think, last year was probably, aside from the first year in terms of running, 3 different jobs, starting the business, there's a lot of wild stories there, working, at my other companies, trying to consult, then doing, closing the pub at night and getting into fights and, police rocking up at our door because we had a pub in Woolloomooloo. So, you can imagine what goes on in that area. That was a crazy year. There were a lot of different stories that came into that year. But I think like last year, going from COVID and having a bit of a false sense of security of all this cash in the bank, from, just having a bit of a tax relief from the government. And then we go, okay, rather than just being a bit more virtual, which a lot of companies did, we go, let's double down and double the team and, do a 50 grand fit out in an office, which is, not much to some, but for a small business it is. We've still got that beautiful office. It's been great. But again, it's just like looking back on it, it was all these crazy decisions we made that really caused a lot of stress and pressure on us last year from, I don't know if it was ego or just trying to get to that next level, always, trying to strive to that next level and chasing that figure, and just losing everything else, neglected getting out and networking, doing this sort of stuff and traveling. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I just neglected because I was just chasing one thing, and that was the wrong thing to chase. But yeah, I think looking back on it, it was just it was pretty crazy. Just having, I think it was like went from 6 to 15 people in the office at one time, and I was like fucking looking around one day and it's like, what do I do? How do I? Like, people just hitting me up with HR questions. I'm like, God, I'm not used to this. So throwing myself in the deep end taught me a lot. We went through a lot of growing pains, a lot of lessons, but I think everything happens for a reason, and we've come out the other end, better. I think I've built a lot more stability and comfort in running the business now, and we've removed shiny objects, and we've come off the back of a record month last month. So with every failures and struggles you have in business, there's always got to be a silver lining.
Love it, mate. Mate, I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the podcast. A lot of valuable insights there. Where can people find GMS, yourself, if they're interested in finding out a little bit more about the business?
Yeah, absolutely. GMS Media Group, just search us up on Google. We've got pretty good SEO. Our handle's at gms.co, and you can look us up www.gmsmediagroup.com.
Beautiful. Once again, mate, thank you for coming on the show. Marto, thanks for putting this together, and to our community, a massive thank you to you guys. 200 reviews officially on Spotify, which is a massive, huge milestone, and we hope you've enjoyed the episode. We'll see you next week.